go live on our YouTube stream. Okay, we are now live for another Tech Talks. Today's topic is Marie Kondoing your course. So just before I hit live, Craig asked who had been reading Marie Kondo. I think the answer is none of us. I am familiar with Marie Kondo's work via her Netflix series that came out a couple of years ago. So this topic, I think it kind of started as a joke when we were kind of brainstorming topics, and we were like, oh, we should do one on spring cleaning. And then somebody said, oh yeah, we should Marie Kondo our courses. And then it just kind of stuck, and we kept working with that as sort of the framework. Oh, Jennifer has read the book. Oh, good. Jennifer, hopefully we do her justice here. But I think that like the main concept here is courses tend to get kind of messy over time, especially if you've been teaching them for a couple of years or maybe many years at this point. I think we tend to add content to courses over time and add details and add clarification and add little things here and there, but we don't always go back and take things away. So sometimes it can be helpful to take some time to be intentional about doing some spring cleaning. So Marie Kondo, for anybody who's not at all familiar, and again, I'm only like a little bit familiar, so I'm probably going to butcher this. Marie Kondo is a Japanese writer and TV star and organizer. And her whole philosophy about organizing your life basically boils down to you should look at some component of your life. In most cases, she's talking about like your belongings, your things, the stuff in your house. And you look at everything in one category. Maybe that category is your kitchen items or your clothes or your collection of books or whatever it is. And then one by one, looking at each object in that category of your belongings, you decide for yourself if that thing sparks joy. Like that's the meme around Marie Kondo is, does this spark joy? And I think sometimes there's like a translation error between Japanese and English about this. But from my understanding, basically it means if something makes you feel an emotion or triggers a memory or gives you a sensation of fulfillment, then that means that thing sparks joy for you. It means that you like having it around and having it makes your life better. But she says, if something doesn't spark joy, then you need to ask yourself, is it really that important? And do I really need to keep it? Like some things you just have to have. Your toothbrush probably doesn't spark joy, but you got to own a toothbrush, right? But other things, maybe if it doesn't give you joy and give you fulfillment, maybe we just keep it out of habit, and maybe it's okay to let those things go. So that's kind of the quick elevator pitch of this idea. So we wanted to talk about what can we do? What would be a method or a framework of using those Marie Kondo principles in our course design, in examining the thing that we built over quarters and years and has maybe gotten a little messy, a little cluttered, and saying, how do we clean this up and pare it down in a way that still fulfills its function, but also gives us joy and gets rid of the things that doesn't give us joy anymore. I was looking at the chat really quick before we move on. Jennifer says, eventually I asked myself if I valued something and thought I did the same for everything. If it would just be really it would just be lonely. Let's just say if the stuff in your courses is no longer useful, then delete it or send it to a locker shell. Ooh, Jennifer is on top of this. Sounds ruthless, actually. Okay, so anyway, we wanted to talk about kind of a framework for thinking about this. So I'm going to hand this over to Melanie because she has kind of an example, or I guess even a case study of what this might look like.
Yeah, so we'll just take a look at an example of what this might look like for one module of an environmental geology class. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And the idea is, right, that if we're going to go back and tidy up our classes, it's really helpful to kind of see the big picture of everything, like all the elements in, for example, a module, that how they all work together and how they all align with the goals of the class or the module. So let's see. Hopefully you should all be able to see my screen.
Yep, got it.
Okay, it's doing
Melanie, would
something.
you want to zoom in a little bit so we can see that text a little bit
Yeah,
bigger?
I'm gonna try. It's doing something really funky here on my
Oh.
end where I can't actually see what it's sharing.
Oh, weird. We can
It is.
see, I can see your browser window with your spreadsheet.
I'm gonna stop and do a reshare and see if I can work this out differently because,
Okay,
so bear with me,
no
because it's
problem.
really being funny. Let's see if I try this. How's that? Is that any better? No.
Yep, there we go. Got it.
You see it better now? Okay.
Yes.
Great. Sorry about that. All right. So this would be just an example of looking at course map from module in environmental geology. Again, this is one example. There's so many different ways to do this. And I know, Angela Rasmussen, you have lots of examples of ways to do this, and there's some posted online. University of Arizona has some really beautiful examples of ways to organize or format sort of your learning goals and your exercises. And so what I've done is I first pulled out the course learning outcomes for this course. And if you're not familiar with a quick place to find those, that's in the online catalog for CCS. So if anyone wants that link, we can post it.
Yep.
And so you can scroll through here, find the course you're interested in, and it shows for both campuses. So I pulled up the SFCC course learning outcomes. So that's a really great place to start.
And I think we should note that some of the programs have really great course learning outcomes, and some of them have very out of date course learning outcomes. So if you're looking in here at your courses and you're not very happy with what you see, that might be a conversation to have with your department sometime and see where they are on their schedule of reviewing learning outcomes and curriculum, because it might be time to refresh that as well, but that's a whole different topic.
Yeah. And so up here, I've listed the course learning outcomes. And so now this is my module 4, for example, about volcanoes. So I pulled in my module outcomes or objectives over here. And so starting with the end, and then this next column is seeing how they actually align with the course outcomes. So making sure they do. If not, then perhaps I've inflated my course over the years, right? So this is a good first check to make sure we're aligning with our goals. And then the next step is looking at the activities and the assessments. And so for this example, I've just typed out some different examples of activities or assessments here. And this allows me to really simply quickly see how each of these activities is aligning with my module objectives. And then in this final column, I'm showing the instructional materials. So what types of supports I'm providing for the students to help them, reach their desired goals towards these module objectives. And so this quick picture, it allows me to really, notice how's my alignment. Do I have assignments in here that perhaps are not aligned at all, right? So I can quickly notice if I have an assignment that's not seeing any or meeting any of my objectives, right? That's a good one to get rid of. I can see things that are perhaps redundant. So maybe this Washington State map exercise, for example, right? This meets one module objective, but that objective is also being met by several other assignments. So perhaps, maybe I'd want to omit this one, maybe combine the important part, this with another exercise. Something else I'm noticing when I look at this is this objective over here, 4.4. Really, I haven't done a lot to support students in fulfilling that and also in measuring their progress towards meeting that objective. So that might point out to me that I could probably do a better job. I could provide more support in my instructional materials and maybe do a better job of creating assessments or weaving that into some other assessments. Something else that jumps out at me also when I'm looking at my my template here is I can think about it in terms of my verbs. What Bloom's taxonomy verbs am I looking at? And this is a quick and easy way to see that. So for example, if I'm looking at this 4.5, right, I have the word describe. Okay, so are my assessments fitting that? Well, this one is more of a recognize, this exercise. This one's more of a locate, maybe a recognize. Okay, over here in this exercise, yes, students here are going to be describing. They're going to be doing cognitive activities that fit within, you know, this verb, that align with that verb. So, okay, I feel okay about that. So this is, you know, one quick way to just really be able to scan all these pieces of that module and look at alignment there. What do you think, Caleb? Did you see some other?
I think that's a really excellent example of how a tool like this can just, like for me personally, I'm a very visual thinker. It really helps me to map something out and be able to pick out visual patterns. And this is a great way to really do that. So you just did this with one module here, but if you did this with all of your modules in your course, which is kind of a bit of a project, right? But yes, I think that would be incredibly helpful to give you that big overall map of the course and really be able to pick out those patterns and identify either things that are deficient or things that are redundant. So about a month ago, our team eLearning went to a conference, and in one session of that conference that I sat in, the presenter was talking about busy work. And she actually provided what I thought was a really good definition of what busy work is. And her definition of busy work was, busy work is any instructional content or activities that lack scaffolding, progress, and transparent alignment, which I thought was a really good definition there. If a student is asked to read something or watch something or do something, and they don't see how it aligns with the course's objectives, they don't see how it scaffolds or fits in with something they've done before and something they're going to do later, and if they don't feel that it's providing any kind of sense of progress, then that's when something feels like busy work. So I thought that was a really helpful definition and framework to think about, because we talk a lot about busy work, right? Students hate busy work, instructors try to avoid it, but what does it actually mean? What it really means is a lack of scaffolding and alignment. So doing an exercise like this course mapping is a really great way to identify if something might feel like busy work to you. Okay, was there anything else we wanted to talk about the learning outcome mapping stuff, Melanie?
No, I think that was mostly some of the main points I wanted to make. Just the idea, you know, that we're really shifting our lens from planning out the teaching instead to planning out the learning, right? So we're turning it around, looking at it from the learning side, and then building our teaching from that. And so, yeah, that's a good way to do it.
Great. So earlier, I think before we hit broadcast on the YouTube stream, Craig said he was interested in this topic because it's not always easy in Canvas to do the spring cleaning that you need to do. And he's right. It's very easy to copy an entire course from one quarter to the next, from one section to the next. But it's a lot harder to actually clean things up that way, because what it'll do is it'll pull in all of your old files, even if they aren't published. They'll all still sit in that course and just kind of fill things up and get messier and messier. I think sometimes it can be helpful to, I'm not going to say start from scratch, because we're not getting rid of all the work we've done, but to start from an empty course shell and then just pull in one module or one assignment at a time, rather than copying over the whole course. So that would be one way to try approaching that process. When you do it that way, you could just pull over one module and then take a few minutes and look at it and make sure that you have everything you need. You're not missing anything. And by doing that, you don't accidentally pull over a bunch of outdated content. You're just pulling over the things that are actually linked in that module. And then do that with the next module and the next module until your course is filled out. So that's one way to not exactly start fresh, because again, you're still using all that content that you've spent time creating, but you're avoiding pulling over all those extra little things that you don't want in there anymore. So the next thing that we wanted to make sure we talked about here was, so let's say you've done a course outcome map like this, or you've done some other exercise or reflection to think about your course content and your course activities. What do you do if you find something in your course that doesn't spark joy, as Marie Kondo said, right? So I think that's, again, one way that the course mapping helps us is if we have something that is not meeting a course outcome, then we don't have to keep it if we don't want it there. But if you have content that is meeting a need, it's serving a function. It's like your toothbrush or your pots and pans or something. It's something you have to have, and you have to have something in the course that fulfills that function. But the thing you currently have isn't giving you any joy. If you have content that you find boring, or if you have assignments that you just dread grading, if you have like a paper or something and you're like, oh God, this thing is coming up, it's a slog to get through this work. The things that the students are submitting are so boring, or it's just painful to get through this. Well, if that's how you feel about an assignment, your students probably feel the same way. So I think at that point, you have to ask yourself, first, can you get away with just cutting that thing out? Again, looking at your course mapping. If you have something else that is fulfilling that objective, that is better or more fun or more engaging for your students or more interesting to you, then maybe you can let that other thing go. But if that's not the case, then maybe you need to think about redesigning that assignment or creating a different assignment that would fulfill the objectives in a more interesting and engaging way. So we don't have like a ton of time to get into this because now we're kind of getting into authentic assessment type of concepts, but I did want to share a couple of links. I'm going to put them in the chat, and then I'll also put them on the YouTube description. The first one, well, here, let me share my screen. 1 second. Just a moment. Okay. Come on, that one right there.
While you're doing that, I see Jennifer has a comment about moving her assessments into a locker shell to reinvent and repost for another quarter. And that way your efforts are still valuable. And yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a really great way, because sometimes it's really hard to let go of an assignment if you put work into it, right? But by shifting it sort of to another place to come back to later, then you don't feel like you're having to really get rid of it all the way.
Yeah. That's a great way to do it, Jennifer. Or a lot of people will have what they call sandbox courses. Basically in Canvas, you can create, or if you're not sure how to do that, talk to one of us and we can show you how to do it. Create an empty course that doesn't have any students in it, is not part of the schedule, but it's still a place that you can put all your things in Canvas, and you can use that to build stuff, to modify stuff, to experiment. And then when you're happy with something, then you can copy it over to another course, to a live course. Okay, so this first tool or repository, I guess, is from teaching.tools. And it is a really excellent repository of different kinds of assignments. And it's very big. There's a lot here. Over on the left-hand side, they have these great filters where you can really drill down on the kind of thing you're trying to accomplish. Do I want what's something that is medium difficulty for 16 to 25 students, and I want to focus on individual engagement instead of discussions or small group or something. I can also say which Bloom's taxonomy levels do I really want to engage in, maybe apply or analyze. And then when you do that, when you use these filters, it'll give you a more condensed list of potential assignment activities. And then if you want to look at one of these, then it gives you more details on what are they talking about? How long does it take? Gives a description of what an assignment like that would look like, gives you some best practices, and then it gives you some further links and resources about how to build an activity like this. So this is a super great resource that we use constantly when we're trying to help instructors brainstorm a newer, fresher, more interesting way to create an assignment or to accomplish a learning objective. So I really like this Teaching Tools website. Another one that we've talked about before, which I also love, is the Authentic Assessment Toolbox. I'm putting that link in the chat also, and I'll put it in the YouTube description later. This website is weird because it looks like it's from GeoCities web domains from the early 2000s. So let me zoom in on this a little bit. So yes, the website itself looks a little rudimentary, a little retro, but the content on this page is so good. This is from an instructor and writer and researcher named John Mueller, and he has spent years working on this repository of authentic assessment examples. He talks about what authentic assessment is, provides some really great research on it. What is it? Why do it? How do you do it? But specifically, I wanted to just go down here and highlight his examples page. And then let me make sure I'm doing going the right place here. Under examples, if we go to tasks and rubrics, then he has different categories, different content areas. So let's just look at, I don't know, that's elementary level, high school, college, university. Let's just look at English. I'm just going to pick oh, maybe this is not the right area. Am I in the wrong spot on this webpage? There we go. Okay, sorry. It was actually the tasks area. Because when you talk about authentic assessments, usually we talk about them in terms of something students are doing. They're not just taking an exam, they're actually applying their knowledge in some way. So he calls those tasks. But anyway, on this page, if you scroll down, again, he has many great examples of different tasks in different categories. And again, we don't have time to go deeply into all these, but if I just clicked on one of them, it usually will have a description of what this assignment would look like, description of the task. So it's not exactly using the tilt framework, but it's kind of tilted, where he's laying out what the task and the criteria are. And then he usually also includes a super helpful rubric that could help you figure out, how am I going to actually assess this? How am I going to provide feedback? What are the criteria that matters for this kind of activity? So again, I would encourage you, if this is something you're curious about and you haven't been on this webpage before, get on here. Here, I'm going to do the direct link to the tasks page. That's what I should have done originally. Look through that and look at a couple of these, because there's some great examples of authentic assessment designs on here. And this is something we've talked to Jared about in the past when we talk about authentic assessment. One of the biggest strengths of this is it's interesting and exciting for the instructor. It's not just better pedagogy, better learning design. It's also more fun. As an instructor, if I assign students to, I saw on here obituaries. If I assign my students to write an obituary for a famous figure or something, that sounds like a lot of fun, and I would be curious to see what my students come up with. Another one on here that we talked about before is satire, getting your students to write a satirical article about something. That sounds like a blast, and I would love to hear, Jared, what was the example we thought of? This was like quarters ago, so you probably don't even remember, but we talked about this once.
Well, we talked a little bit about like the lab that would get me fired.
Yeah.
Design the lab that would get me fired.
Yeah. So if you're teaching like a lab sciences class or something and you need to go over lab safety procedures, you could just have your students memorize rules and regulations or do a multiple choice test on that. And maybe you should still do some of that foundational stuff anyway. But if you had them say, write me a satirical lab procedure that would get me fired. Okay, first of all, you can't do that unless you understand what the no-no things are in the first place. So you're demonstrating knowledge and understanding, but you're also showing some creativity of what would be some funny ways to break these rules. And again, that would just be amazing to see what my students came up with in the context of that. So now as the instructor, I'm looking forward to seeing my student work. I'm excited to sell them on this project. Hopefully that makes them more engaged and more interested in it. So now we're sparking joy, right? We're doing something that is enjoyable for us as the instructor and for our students. And hopefully we are making it scaffolded and aligned with our content so it doesn't feel like busy work. Thanks, Jennifer. I don't know if I'm going to say that one on the YouTube stream. So anyway, I think that's about all we have time for our content. We got through it all. Melanie, was there anything that we missed that we wanted to make sure we touched on?
I think that was pretty complete. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. But if anybody has anything they would want to chat about further, we can hang out for a little bit longer. If you've tried anything like this and you wanted to share your experience, that would be amazing. If you have any questions or frustrations, let's chat a little bit if we want.
Well, before we got underway, you know, the Marie Kondo for me is an organizational mindset as well as one of decluttering. And I know that, or at least I think, I can't be the only faculty member who is frustrated by Canvas's lack of page organization scheme. Not being able to put pages in folders and subfolders and find them that way, rather than scrolling through a list of probably over 100, sometimes 200 pages of material, not all of which makes its way into a course, but it's all there in the course. And I know that is something over which, you know, in terms of the speed at which Canvas develops these abilities is really up to Canvas. But that to me is a severely anti-Marie Kondo feature of Canvas, and one that I would love to see people in e-learning put a little pressure on Canvas.
That's good. That's good feedback. Yeah, if you had any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear them. Otherwise, we might have to think about that one a little bit. Maybe there's some. Oh no, Jerry's gone. Never mind. He doesn't have anything.
Scared him off.
Yeah. The files tool in Canvas in a course is not super helpful. Because again, anytime you add anything to a course, even if you make a course announcement and you happen to put a little cat picture in your announcement because you like putting little images in there, it all just ends up right in that files section of your course. And then it sits there forever, including if you copy that course into a new quarter and that announcement isn't even there anymore, those files still remain, right? And that's it's a frustration. And it's not super easy to organize that or clean it up. I mean, yeah, when you're in the files area, you can order it by name or by date created or by size, which I guess is kind of helpful because you could at least organize by date and maybe look at the oldest things and say, am I still using this, or do I have 10 syllabi from 10 quarters ago that have followed me through as I copy this over and over again? And that would be one way to clean things up a little bit. Jennifer, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mentioned it in the chat, but that's one of the things, because if I basically copy over an announcement or an assignment, sometimes the photographs don't copy over, or they will link to the previous, course, which students don't have access to. So they'll get broken links, and it's just a nightmare. Yeah. So for specific photos or documents or files that I know are not unique to a particular course, I will save them under my own personal files, so that when I go to upload that picture or that document, I can choose the user files. And since I'm the user, then it's not tagged to a specific shell or course that the students may no longer have access to.
Oh, interesting. I've never done that technique before. That's
Yeah,
cool.
I mean, I just found it because so many times I would copy a previous announcement from last quarter and people would say that the images were broken or something. And so I started investigating, and I just started doing it that one way. And I asked a student, can you see it now? And they said yes. And so that's the way I've done it for the last, I don't know, a year and a half.
This makes me think we might have to do another tech talk in the near future about just file structure and file
Mhm.
organization in Canvas. That would be a really good topic, I think.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Because then it's not inherent to that, whatever that course is. And if you don't set your settings up to allow students to see the courses before or after the quarter, then they no longer can see the photo, even if it's an announcement that's put out this quarter.
Yep. No, that's good. I'm putting that on the list for sure. Any other thoughts or frustrations or unanswered questions that we could also put on the list to go forward with?
Jared says known pitfalls of wholesale course copying.
Yeah, that would probably be part of this topic. Is
Yep.
This is some of the reasons you might not want to just do a wholesale course copy. Yeah, that's good.
From an instructional design point, do we have any information, any data whatsoever about the point at which a student freaks out from the long list of things that they see in a module, and how might that be cut down? And I know there are a couple of different strategies, and I've played around with them a little bit. I mean, you can have a page in Canvas, and then in that page link to other pages which are not a part of that module. And so it doesn't present that, or initially it doesn't present that this module is going to be huge and there's so much to read, so it doesn't cause the student to freak out, but they may not access the 3 or 4 pages that are linked, or even the assignment that's linked at the bottom of the page, those kinds of things. And I'm just wondering if we have any information, data, theories about where that sweet spot is.
That's a great question, Craig. Because you're right, there's pros and cons to it, right?
Right.
On the one hand, we do know, and we know from analytic data, but also anecdotally, a lot of students, if something is not just listed chronologically within a module, a lot of students are just likely not to ever look at it. Because that's one of the advantages of the module, is it puts a little check mark next to each item as the students work their way down it. And a lot of students rely on that, for better or for worse, to make sure they're not missing something.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you have a lot of content and you have a module that has 20 or 30 things in it, that could get overwhelming. And then you do run the risk of students disengaging or skipping content or something like that. Melanie or Nick, if you have any ideas, please chime in. But I guess one thing that would occur to me is, if we are talking about a module that has 20 or 30 items, then maybe the question becomes, do we need that much content in one weekly module? Or could this be a case where we need to think about trimming or condensing or finding content that pulls double duty on something? If you've got one article that does this and one article that does this, could you find something that does both at once, so that you can just condense that way? But that's a very personalized, individualized kind of question. I don't think there's a single right answer about that. I think that very much depends on the content area and the curriculum.
Yeah, I would agree. I have a couple thoughts about that. So one, maybe breaking it up into several modules. Another one is, you've got like 20 pages. Is there a way that the pages can be grouped with headings? So you're kind of breaking it up a little bit for the students, mentally, as they're looking through it. And then another thought that I don't know if this is necessarily going to relate to your specific situation, but within the individual pages, after working with Nick and Caleb for a while, I'm a huge fan of accordion formatting, where you know, if you feel like there's 2 pages of content they could work together, if you put them onto one page, but with accordioning the content, that's a lot easier for the student's brain and eyes to process while still having all that content there for them to access really quickly.
Yeah. That kind of goes in with what Jennifer mentioned in the chat about tilting can get very expansive, right? Tilting, I think, is amazing and super valuable, but it does create a lot of text. And an accordion content might be a way to kind of find the best of both worlds, where you can have your tilted content and your examples and your criteria all listed on a page, but maybe hidden behind that accordion, so that the students, when you have those type A students that want to see everything, then it's all there for them. And when you have the students that is never going to read that much, let's just be honest with them, then we want them to really focus on this is the task, and that's what you want. And then if you want to look at the purpose and the criteria and the examples, then it's all there. But the thing we want you to see first is that task. What do we want you to do? So accordion content is a great way. And yeah, Melanie, I think I'll just do a quick little screen share here very briefly. Having these text headers and then indenting content in a Canvas module is a great way to visually organize content. Like you said, to make it less overwhelming, to make it feel more structured. So if you had a header that said readings for this week, and then you had 5 things under there and you indented them a couple times, and then you had a header for activities or discussions or whatever, then you can still have a lot of content there, but it doesn't feel so overwhelming and massive. It's much more chunked up and scaffolded in that way. So that's a great way to just make that a lot more approachable.
Maybe to chime in with another extreme, I won't say too much of the specifics, but one of the, just for anonymity, but one of the most successful, just out of student success, using that criteria, you know, passing students in a class, one of the most successful courses I saw was, I mean, it was insane how large the modules were, which gut instinct as an ID, I'm like, that is way too much. Cognitively, that's a lot that a student's going to have to parse through. But, and Jennifer brought it up in the chat, long modules, but sets up progress monitoring requirements or module requirements, because each individual item in the module was an assignment or a quiz or something that had to be done before something else, and gated the content. Usually that word's kind of a bad word in instructional design. When you're gating content, you can lose students along the way, cause weird hiccups. But because everything was really structured that way, it didn't matter how long the module was, because the student, if they go to the to-do list, boom, they're at, oh, looks like I got to do this first. Then they jump there. Okay, cool. I did that. Click next. Now I'm on to the next one. So no matter what, they get shoved through that kind of linear path. I don't think it's always the best option, and it just depends on the course. But I mean, as it sounds like Jennifer does, it can help with that length too, because it makes everything so structured. There is no reason for a student to get lost cognitively in the weeds, because they know exactly what they got to do. But you know, that's an extreme, right? So finding that balance, right? That might be the more common for our faculty.
So I don't know, I guess for me, it would probably be a combination of these two things. One is, where can we simplify and combine and find things that kill 2 birds with 1 stone, so I don't have to have 3 things, I can just have 1. But then also, yeah, using some of those module design elements and tools in Canvas to conceptually and mentally chunk out and organize and curate things in a way that feels much more manageable. Hopefully that's some food for thought there. Well, it is almost 1:45, so we went a little bit over, but with great conversation, and people are sticking around, which is awesome. I do not need to be anywhere right now, so if anybody wants to keep chatting, I'm happy to. Thanks for coming, Angela.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I despise in some ways that to-do list on the right, because then they won't even bother going to the modules.
It's a double-edged sword for sure.
Yeah, so this quarter I decided to chunk up and scaffold and tilt a particular assignment, and I made I can't remember what the word is, it's a stopgap, whatever. I made a requirement that you had to read this certain page before you could complete the assignment. And I got so many emails from students because they were just clicking on the to do. And then they would come to, and they'd be like, it's like 10 o'clock at night. And they're like, why can't we do the assignment? And I'm like, well, they wanted into it. And I said, well, did you complete the page requirement first? You have to, they're like, what page? I'm like, you have to go to the modules and go through the page requirements. And so I don't know. I don't know that that's something that can be changed by student preference, unless Canvas just wants to take it away.
So one thing that I've done in my course that I think can kind of help with this to-do list syndrome. I don't lock anything down, but what I do is, so the course that I teach is online only and it's very discussion heavy. So most of my work is I want students to do independent research and then share out their findings in a discussion board. In the discussion board, yeah, it has a due date, so it does show up in the to-do list. But in the discussion prompt, what I say is, based on the instructions in our weekly content module, and then I list the name of that page, I say, share your findings here. So the only thing that shows up in the to-do list, yes, is the assignment and not the content. But when they get to the assignment, they can't do it without first going to the module and actually doing the readings. And I found that is fairly effective at preventing students from missing stuff, because they just can't possibly answer the discussion post if they haven't read the context of it first, because there's nothing there for them unless they've done the reading first.
Something that I just started doing is, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. So, and I met with you, Caleb, and we had talked about this. What I'm doing now to get people like Jennifer, what you're saying about the getting away from just the to-do list, is I have a reading assignment. It's very small small points, but they have to do the reading. Like I make the reading an assignment and they have to have top takeaways that they list. And then, so I'm making sure that they're doing the reading. And then I do, I have started in a paper that they do each week, like an event paper for intercultural communication. And I put my lecture video in the assignment, if that makes sense. So it's like in the directions. So it's in the task part of the tilted assignment. And that really helps. So I think that's going to be helpful, because I've thought about this and I'm like, it's so frustrating. Like Jennifer was saying, where we create all of these modules, all of this information, there's so much there. And then you find the students are just doing the to-do list. So I'm like, okay, everything that I basically have to be very intentional with what I put out there and be like, okay, even if it's a small amount of points, I'm going to put points to it. I'd rather not say, okay, reading is an assignment and there's no points. Then they get confused. So I pretty much make it everything worth points, but they have to do something, if that makes sense. I think that might help.
Thanks, Angela. Yeah, I've seen the way you do it, and I think it's a really clever way to get them to engage with that content. All right. Well, it looks, if anybody has any closing thoughts, please feel free to share. Otherwise, we'll probably call it a day. We have one more. Oh, Angela, were you going to say something, or Jared?
Oh, I was just going to say, during this call, I got a call that SCC and FCC, everything's closed tomorrow. Just so everybody
I saw
knows.
that too. Oh, darn, we have to work from home.
Yeah, right.
Yes. Well, everybody have a great day. Have a great snow day tomorrow. We'll have one more Tech Talk next week in December, and that will be about course reviews. And Angela, are you going to be able to join us for that one? Because you were going to help out just a little bit on that, right?
Yeah, I'll be
awesome. There. Perfect.
Yep.
So that should be a good one. We're going to kind of open up the black box of course reviews a little bit. talk about what they are not for, and how hopefully they can be a useful and productive and non-adversarial experience. So hopefully we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Hi all.
Bye.